first?
I'd like to get the I11 over the line into the pool.
Once more onto the QA. Okay. Okay.
So I think there's no edits above actors and actions. Actors and actions is, as we were talking about it yesterday. Some of the changes are ones that we just talked about. Now, there's on the integration tests. I don't know how you want to do this. Do a slow walkthrough, or what's the best?
Well, I read through them all about 10 hours ago.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see anything wrong with the integration test.
Mm-hmm.
I saw some issues with the actors and actions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if QA would really bother with that.
Bother with which
and
one?
it might be like there might be more a discussion between me trying to build it and you trying to design it.
Which specifically? Which one are you talking about?
Actors and actions. There isn't any. There's no update request.
For QA.
No, for worker.
All right. Sorry, I thought you were talking about QA.
No. I mean, like, as QA, I'm not sure that QA would be allowed to be involved in this type of question. This is more like you and I are trying to co-author this, and I'm trying to figure out what it is I should build.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I think we're missing some actions.
Okay.
So, do you want to go over that now, or do you want to just be like, look, if it passes QA, that's cool. We can refine it in the pool in terms of implementers trying to figure out what this thing is.
Well, let's do it both, because we're bootstrapping up here. What would be good is if we can agree that I11 is of the quality standard required of the pool, then we can get it into the pool, and hopefully that wouldn't take too long. We can also then talk about which areas are missing, because I've added a couple as well. I don't know if you spotted, like past completion.
Yeah, I saw a few sneaky expansions going on.
Well, if we didn't actually have any QA action that allowed them to say this was complete, so that was a oversight.
Yeah. Look, man, it looks. I can't fault it from a QA standpoint.
Okay. All right. Grand. Right.
Except, hold on a second.
You just said you can't fault it.
Yeah, because that's how English works. You get to say something and then pull it back halfway through because there's no NFT image.
Yes, there is. Update NFT image 2.9.
No. There's no NFT image.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay.
So I'll go make you one.
Yeah. Or I can do it. I've got some credits on it. I've been using them as well.
Okay, well, why don't we see which one is the best? I mean, what do you think it should be called? Well, I'm going to make an image and you make an image, and then we'll together pick the one we like. How about that?
Yeah. Okay, let's go. Would you want to do that now, or?
Sure.
Oh, no, you just went quiet there. I just realized you might be off doing it, and I'm sitting here not doing it.
I am doing it. I'm sorry, it's not a good use of time.
Yeah. Let's
So
do the async. I have this thing now.
what should we do now then? Because it's good, but it doesn't have an NFT image. So
Right. So I'll add an NFT image to it. Well, you create one, stick it in Discord. I'll create one, and then we can decide either way. Does R10 have a? Yes, it does.
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Now, as an idea, can you just take the request image? I have an image here ready to go. It ain't pretty, but I got it.
Can I see it?
Will that change whether you pass it or not?
Not in the slightest. Not in the slightest. Well, do you want to just update it and I'll see it when it's updated?
Yeah, it's in general. There you go.
I'm not.
It is ghastly.
I'm. What was the seed for that? What?
And Bog's Blood Pain in the style of Hot Pot Art 1.
All right. Okay. Yep, that's the one.
Okay? So that's the one. Alrighty.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Okay. So add that in.
Yep.
What now?
So are we agreeing that both R10 and I11 should now move into the pool?
Oh, that's bold, Max. It's bold.
It's QE's job.
I take it you do think that?
I do. Yeah, I do.
What happens if you're wrong?
Well, the QA is there as arbiters of format, not the quality of the idea and not the completeness of the idea. But it's whether it's coherent if it targets a request. Because we can't have the QA saying, "Oh, that's a shitty idea." What it can say is that's it's an incoherent idea. You can say it's incoherent, but you can't say it's shitty because they don't know. So what we're saying here...
Okay. So, I mean, it is definitely coherent.
Okay. So, that being said, if we add in the NFT at the top, then I suggest for the various hats, because you don't need to do this, because I'll be the moderator, so I'll update the pool, I'll move it inside of Git, make sure that I'll pass these Docusaurus actions, and then we have it now in the pool. So I can do that.
Well, I'm nearly there. I'm nearly done with it.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Anyway.
All right. Okay. Well, you crack on. That's fine.
Oh, were you talking about the role of the moderator where you'll move the documents over to the pool?
Right. Yeah.
Sorry. Well, you will need to blank the existing pool.
Yes. Yep. Yes, we will.
These should be the only things in the pool.
Yeah, it's the only thing that's passed in QA. Yep.
Okay.
I'd also I'll need to.
Shit, if you're good with it, I'm good with it.
Right, cool. I also need to update because the pool doesn't reflect now the names that we used for the process. So, but I'll do all that. That's fine.
All right, because that's part of the outputs.
Yeah. Yep. Precisely. Now.
Okay, so now you'll begin executing on I11.
Yes,
right.
Correct. So the QA has now decided that this is coherent and of the format required of the pool. Now that's not to say it's complete. So now in the kind of author kind of role,
Yeah, right. Okay. So the act of QA approving it ought to be a pull request.
Yes.
So what you should do is make those changes to the pool where you blank the pool and add this one in, and then you should PR against master.
Yes. And, well, who accepts that? It's the moderator that accepts it into the pool, updates pool. So
right. and that's moderator, I guess, is both of us. So no, QA needs to accept the merge, because that's how, using Markdown, we do the action accept. Because it's supposed to be a worker does a PR to enter the pool, because we're in Markdown and with Git.
Right, but there's a problem with that one. Not in this minimum situation where basically we are all of these roles, but a pool can have multiple QAs, and what you don't want necessarily is a QA stomping all over a pool. You want the pool moderator to accept the PR. So the QA issues a yes or a no, based on what the worker has submitted, and that goes into the pool via the process of sending a message to the moderator saying, here's a PR, I'm happy with it as QA, here's the assets that references, please update your pool. Because the QA don't own the pool, the moderator owns the pool.
Right. Okay, so long as there's a pull request in there somewhere.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
It's a paper-based system after all.
Yeah.
And are you able to make that update to R10 that says that we need to actually make the computer version of this thing?
Yes, I am. Let me take a note of that, actually, make sure. So, yes, happy to do that. Yep. Okay. So, well, I think we've got our first pool with with something actually in it. That only took about a month longer than expecting.
A month, and the rest like a year.
Okay, so that triggers a whole bunch of things in terms of now. A lot of this is just translating what we've got in this idea, because we've done so much thinking about this process that for example, the pull process itself could almost just flop over into that document. The request template and idea template we should be able to derive from where we finally got to on these ones. So it could be quite quick that we've got outputs that are available to be QA'd. Now, the question is, do we go through the escrow step, and if so, how? It would be good to exercise that piece, because otherwise we're not...
Yeah, I think it's just we each get issued some funds, and then we spread them around against items in the pool. See how we get on.
Yes, but I'm thinking specifically so the pool has only one idea in it at the moment. I would like to exercise.
It's better than no idea, right?
Yeah. So much better than zero. I would like to exercise the process. We go. So it's now in fundable. I'd like to exercise the process so it goes to escrowed and then in completion QA. As opposed to...
Okay, well, you better issue out some money then.
Yeah, I mean we can just put it as jubes or tokens or whatever we want, but the important thing is
I want US dollars. You can spend jubes. I want US dollars. Like, just make some up. I mean, that's how the United States does it anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so the next step is we'll take this to fundable. Now, the question is, who's the funder?
Well, we are both funders. Why don't you give us both $1,000?
Well, we're both also workers.
So what's your point?
The point is, do we want to do I don't know, it's almost like a role play where you're the funder, I'm the worker on this, because this is all MD stuff.
Why can't I be a funder and a worker?
Yes, you.
Are you telling me that's not what you would do
No,
if
no.
you started earning money through this system?
Oh, no. You can absolutely do that if you want. Yeah. Just the,
Okay,
the question
so
is, which do we do?
the one that takes the least effort, which is we do both of those roles.
Okay. All right. So the next, so I'm going to then, right off the base of this, I'm going to, under fundable, go through a very low weight negotiation, which I think we've just had, basically, and then put it into escrowed. And then from
Well, someone's got to put some money up, and then someone's got to say, "I'm going to do this work."
yes, it's kind of, I don't know whether I'm over emphasizing on this one. It's kind of a bit weird because, as you say, we're the
It's super
funders
weird.
and workers,
Yeah,
so maybe it's not worth.
I don't know. Like it might. I mean, in my eyes, we got this thing so close to design that I'm like, I can absolutely see how to make that now.
Yeah.
If once we make it, this problem is like maybe the easiest of all the problems.
Yes.
Where it's like,
I think we're going
how
to.
do we do a contract with escrow lock using markdown files and get pull requests? Who else is going to want that problem solved? Anybody?
Yeah. Fair one.
You know,
Yeah.
so look, it is a problem that needs solving. I'll give you that for sure, but I just don't know. I think it's a waste of effort to try and solve it in Markdown. I think we should just wait for the software.
Yeah. Okay.
We've got enough
Happy with
to actually do work now,
Yeah.
like putting dust, gathering all the dust together, trying to get some more items through QA, like getting the journal app
Yep.
through QA.
Yep.
Be a big one.
Okay. All right. I'm happy with that. Yeah, because that's fine. Conceptually, there's nothing in escrow or the state change between fundable and escrowed via the publication of contracts and the linking of contracts that seems particularly difficult now. Obviously, much is dropped between lip and cup, but it seems like straightforward. I don't think that's going to be a major problem. Now, what else? Well, I think we're done with that, really. So I'm just going to do it as agreed in this idea. I'm going to be turning up as a worker and just going to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you don't need to have funding to do work.
No, you don't.
I'm sure it's nice. But
Yeah. Okay. Right, I think that's done then. I don't think there's anything, unless there's anything. Oh, right. Okay. In author mode, you said there were some things missing. What were those?
yeah, there's some actions missing. As a worker, there's no update request or idea.
You're right. What is proposed is actually renaming create request to update request.
Yeah, but you need to create because create in this instance is generates that ID.
Right.
You know, like you can't update when there's nothing there, and you can't delete with an update.
Yeah. Okay.
But then the trouble is that your number of actions you end up with 6 actions now: create, update, delete for each of a request or idea.
Right. Yeah.
It's tempting to try and collapse them down.
Yeah.
And make, you could call the action, say, DUD request, and then one of the parameters you supply in the payload is the create, this is the update, or this is the delete. Maybe I shouldn't suggest that we be lazy. I don't know, it just feels like verbose.
Well, remembering that every time we add in an action, then it's incoherent not to have an integration test that hits that action at least once. So
Yeah, I know.
that it kind of expands quite quickly, which is why
Yeah, I know.
you see pool membership management, because we had a whole bunch of actions that we're never going to test. So that whole section.
Yeah, look, I don't think that I don't think that's wrong actually to have some actions that don't get included in an integration test, because I'm like, well,
Right?
you don't need 100% coverage, because for the primary reason, this is all theoretical, and then once we go to actually build it, there'll be a bunch more things come out of the woodwork. You know, like the integration test also not the end of the thing. You know, like just because you hit them all, QA might still be like, you did a shitty job. You hit all the integration tests, but you did a shitty job.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. If I don't know, it feels wrong. So even if it's incomplete, and even if there's a quality overlay which QE can still object to, it seems wrong to have an action that knowingly you're never going to test. That seems that seems kind of, you know.
Why though? I mean, like you don't, you sort of don't care about the actions. You care about, is that state chart being run? Is the uses that you described being done? Is the strategic intent being met? You know, like the integration test is not the end of everything, the specifier that passes it all. Like you can still get 100% integration test coverage and still actually miss the main point.
Yeah.
Like if I set out to do that to you, I could probably.
Yeah.
Like the amount of time you'd have to spend to write your integration test so that I couldn't do that to you is more effort than it would take me to like sort of wiggle around it each time. Like
that's true. The flip is also true. You could have something that hits the intent, but in a way that you're not entirely sure whether it's actually going to run as stated, without understanding what your integration tests are and what the coverage is. So
yeah, like I mean, I agree with the ideal that you're saying, but no one ever gets 100% coverage, and sure, certainly not in the theoretical stage.
yeah.
What I was intending with the integration test is so that at a glance I can read through and understand what you mean. Like it should take me more effort to pass your test and not give you what you meant as well than, it's just easier to figure out what you want and give you that. Like that was the point of the integration test, not to cover every single possible feature, but to allow me to know that, have good confidence that I understand what you want.
Okay. Well, here's something I was playing around with, which I've not published, and I'm not planning on editing it necessarily, but maybe adding it. I was looking at. Thanks for that link on state charts and testing. That was really interesting. I was thinking about this is quite wordy. It's quite long. It might be helpful to have this as a state chart as opposed to a list of menu options and so on. I don't know whether that's of value to you or not, but it might condense down and at single glance be able to see exactly what the original intent of this part of the idea is as a diagram as opposed to a list.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't really.
What do you do?
Well, what I might do is not put it. I don't want to update the idea. What I want to be now writing is the pull process doc, which is the output. So what I might do is take this information in the integration test and show that as a state chart inside of the pull process, which I think would be easier to handle. And, when you come to write it, it'll probably be the place to go to as opposed to this format here. So I'm not going to edit I11 now in pool, but I think pool.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably use both. I'd look at that state chart and those actions and the integration test, and I'd use them all together, because there's just sort of there's errors, right? Like every time we look at it, there's something missing or something not quite right.
Right.
Yeah,
it's diminishing.
They all just keep happening.
Yeah, it's diminishing returns. We could keep on going round the buoy and finding edge cases and so on. I'm sure there are, but I'm content that what we got here is the absolute what we were after, which was the minimalist version of the dream catcher in order to get things in through a pool and out to outputs and record work so that we can later apply attribution to it. I think that it meets that original intent. So this is why I'm saying I'm not planning on updating I11. I11 is now in QA. It's a big thing once it's in the QA to actually edit it, because you've got to go back through the QA cycle. You can't.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, I'm not really going to do that. However, in this instance, there's a number of outputs where I think I could probably state this more clearly as a state chart. But that will come down to, I'll produce it and propose it and see if it gets accepted. Yeah. And there may well be other ways of doing it, but let's give that a try. Okay.
Yep.
Right. So did you have anything you wanted to add on to I11 at this point, or are we now at the point where...
Yeah, the integration test, where you have integration test 1, subset 6. Why did the worker delete the request and then create a new one?
So this was part of the conversation yesterday where we're saying if we've got the idea of, now was it revoke contract, then we're saying, well, surely you can revoke a request. So the conversation at the time was...
Right.
Yeah, maybe.
I see okay, I think I see your line of thinking there. So the thing with request is that they need to preserve that ID. So we need that update. I was thinking of contracts as much more disposable, but I suppose that it actually makes sense to keep their history as well. Yeah. So contract would be like update. So you'd propose a contract and then update, and then revoke, right? And if during the process of proposing or updating, someone else proposed or updated the exact same thing as you, then you've reached lock.
Yes. Yep. And just so I'm certain about this one, yesterday when we were talking about it, propose is the same as update for contract.
Well, I was implying that propose was a creation event that made a whole new thing. Update would preserve the history so you could see how the proposal had evolved over time.
Okay. Do we need a separate
which
action
sounds useful. Maybe it isn't.
I rather like the parsimony of your approach when you're talking about proposed contract, which is proposed contract is essentially either it's magicked out of nothing or it's effectively an update. Now, whether the history or not is preserved, we don't actually go into that in this idea.
So you just want to make proposed contract have the ability to supersede the previous one. So if you go propose and you've got the same ID and it updates something and that prior proposal doesn't have any takers, it's not an escrow, then it's the same as going delete and then propose with the new one.
Yes. Yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
or not even.
yeah, that works to me, man.
Yeah, that's cool.
That works to me.
So in the now on requests, we've got create requests, added and delete request for the reasons we've just gone through yesterday, which was maybe you write a
Yeah,
request and you totally bollocksed up on that and your name's against it.
yeah.
I just want to get rid of it,
Cool.
which is going to happen. And you quite rightly pointed out that we don't have an update request or update idea. Now, should we, when we were talking yesterday, when we're saying, well, if we've got proposed contract, which counts as an update as well, shouldn't we just have a proposed request or an update request, which counts if it doesn't exist previously, then it generates a new one. And then if you rerun
All
the
right.
previous just to be...
So in MongoDB and those things, they call that upsert. So it's like it's either insert if it's not there or updated if it is.
Right.
So I think that's more really the command we're talking about, upsert request.
Yeah. Is that would that be a better way for you to get your head around this? Because
look, either way works for me. I think that I don't know enough to make the call now which one I'd want to use, because I would want to see how the model looked when I had a blockchain for a worker and a blockchain for a funder, and then I had a blockchain representing the pool, and I've got these children in it that are these items. What type of action does it make sense to have? Do I need to open, who needs permission to talk to who needs to know about who's the boss? How do those actions get rejected? Who does the checking? Which chain is responsible for making sure the consistency of everything's held together nicely? All that. So I actually don't know what I would prefer to choose out of those options.
Okay, in that case, we'll just there's no point talking about it really at this point. Because
I know that I'd only want update NFT, because that's sort of, I know that that's always going to be an update, because you have to have an NFT. You can create your thing without an NFT, so it's always going to be just update.
Okay. What I suggest on request and idea then is we just keep it as is on create request, create idea, with idea that actually is an upsert. So
sure, man. Yeah. And look, I'm sorry for introducing confusion there, but I will have to choose one of those things based on how the build goes more than anything. I'm sorry I don't have a concrete answer here.
Yeah, no worries. Okay. I'm happy with that if you are.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I feel like we understand each other is the main point.
Yep.
We may not have it 100% right, and as we go to build it, I'm sure we won't. But I feel like we have a common understanding of what each action does.
Yes. Yeah. I agree.
And I don't know how we sort of capture that in the working environment, right? Like, if both of us were hostile to each other, there's this amount of sort of trust or unspoken understanding that people need to have between each other for stuff to work. And you also want to sort of foster that, because it's faster than having to write long documents and read long documents.
Yeah.
So it's about just enough process so that no one gets ripped off or hard done by. And it's I don't think we're going to know that until we actually go to do it. But that's what I'm getting at with not having 100% coverage in the integration test.
Yeah.
We don't want to kill the spontaneity or the floppiness, that you need to solve a problem.
Yeah, well, actually, this is an interesting point. So, where that is comes to the fore is when we've created outputs, and in this case, all the outputs are MDs. This is not actually, speaking to the actual code, because at no point have we said code this. This is all in MDs. When those outputs are done, it's incompletion QA that really says, genuinely speaking, we've got the request, we know what was intended, and we know what your ideas are, but the amount of wiggle room in passing QA, I think, is exactly what you've talked about there. So, for example, if we said you had to hit every integration test, and while I was doing this, I think, well, actually, delete request. Nobody's going to delete a request. I'm not going to put that into the pool. Does QA come back and say, "Niet, I'm not going to pass you as doing the output," or do they look at, well, is there anything in the request that you've broken by not having a delete? Probably not. So that's the place that wiggle room exists.
That wiggle room is going to be a funny one, right? Because you're going to get funders that are like, ooh, I wish I could get my money back. I kind of had this other bill that I forgot about. And then they could start sort of picking nits in it and being like, that says upsert, that doesn't say propose.
Right.
And that's what QA needs to step into and be like, look, if someone has a complaint, QA comes in and says, well, we actually assess the essence or the spirit of what was being asked for.
That's exactly right, and that's the thread throughout this. This is the reason we originally did the request and idea, which was to give, okay, so here's what we're trying to do, but we're not putting any detail in it. But we are saying you can't do that, you must do that. You can't if you could or should. Then the idea is going, yeah, okay, I've got an idea of how to do that. And then there's the contract. So a funder does come along, they put the contract. But the important part is the contract is then escrowed. The money attached to the contract is in escrowed. So the funder can't piss around saying, actually, I said delete and you put in upsert and therefore you failed it. This is the idea isn't the contract, I guess is the quicker way to say that. The idea is not the contract. The contract is saying we will give this QA the right to judge whether the output.
Yeah, that's more accurate, right? The contract is to give QA the power to decide whether or not this thing was met in essence or not.
Exactly, and that sidesteps the whole kind of lawyering where you've got I think a 70-page.
Like that's the worst part. It's like, I wanted this thing. I built this thing, and now they don't want to pay, or it just that whole problem goes away if you're like, well, here's this high reputation team that decides for you.
Right, exactly.
And
they're incentivized to keep the reputation because that's how they get their work. And so the QA is not going to be a dick, and it's going to be disinterested. Neither funder nor worker pro either. They're going to say, well, in reality, changing delete request to upsert request, did that make any difference whatsoever on the overall intent, which would be It's like, no, it didn't. It's like, so shut up. I'm going to release escrow, and there's nothing you can do.
That's right.
Escrow. It's a beautiful system.
It is right.
Beautiful system. But yeah, I think that's why integration tests here feels a bit contracty, doesn't it? As in, you got
it's too that's what I'm getting at. Like it's too contracty.
Yeah.
Especially if you try and insist on 100% coverage.
Right, precisely. And so, but with the intention of the idea not being a contract, these are just like these are suggestions to make, as the authors of the idea have the guys doing the work, the workers have a clearer chance of understanding exactly what you meant, but knowing that if they go off piste, if it's go for good reasons, QA is going to be fine with that.
Yeah. And then even if it turns out that you did not do what the idea asked, you might actually be fulfilling the request nonetheless,
Right.
and then you'll get your payout from that.
Right. Yeah. Because the request author might not be the same as the idea author.
Yeah, it doesn't. Your work doesn't just go in the bin, I guess, is the main point.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, if it comes quite close, but you think this is valuable, then you can, go back around the boy with the actual idea that you've now generated, and the outputs, and you've got the provenance of where you came from. Yeah, as I say, it was many words to say. Basically, I'm happy with this. I think we're in lock with it. It's worth pointing out that this is not the contract. The idea is not the contract. This is a kind of statement of intention of the idea, but it doesn't necessarily need to be complete, but definitely needs to be coherent, which is what QA is checking.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. Okay.
Cool. Right.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I'm happy with that. Can you give me 30 seconds? I just really need to go for a piss. Sorry.
Go, man. Yeah. Tell the whole world what I do.
It's not on record. I'll have to be jiggling up and down.
Yeah. They're timing you.
Right. How much more time you got?
I have 15 more minutes.
Right. What do you want to spend it on? Because I've got what I needed out of this call. Is there anything you want to raise? And there's a whole bunch of topics that we could talk about. But what's your priority?
I would like to continue on that diagram that you drew.
Okay. Yep. Just to be aware, I've not actually put any additional thought in over our conversation yesterday, other than the conversation.
That's fine. I'm still struggling with it in terms of what do we call this thing that we offer without it sounding like a mouthful. It's as though we are trying to unbundle a company and all the things you get with a company, like a QA department, like HR.
Well, it's like a headless organization. Yeah, this is not the right term, but effectively it's a headless organization, isn't it? It's a self-organizing, or it's a company that's emergent.
I mean, is now a good time to call it a software-defined org?
Yes, I think it might well be. We've been trying to use that term for some
years. How far do we have to go to be allowed to call it that?
It really is, isn't it? It's defined in software, it's reconfigurable in software, it's dynamic based on the events that create state changes, and so the organization comes in and out and, balloons and then collapses.
Right. So for every object that anyone creates in our system, it is natively included within a software-defined org dedicated to its growth.
Well, the interesting thing is there's no object software-defined org here. Software-defined org is a description of the emergent behaviors of all the objects and the interactions and the state changes. But there's no thing you could point to saying that's a software-defined
I would
org.
say that the software-defined org is the collection of services that is attached to each object that gets produced.
Right. Yeah.
Most noteworthy are the labor marketplace, the infrastructure marketplace, and the funding marketplace. Those three seem to be the dominant terms that are services that come attached to it. And I would say that if you had those three services, that's a software-defined org.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the point I was making is it's a kind of a meta description of interactions of various things. It's equivalent to I don't know, congestion on roads. There's no such thing as congestion. Congestion appears by a bunch of objects moving down a road, and depending on how fast they are and so on. So software org, I think, is a similar kind of thing. It can be created out of nowhere simply by two people interacting in a way and deciding, actually, we're going to be doing this together, and we've reached some kind of agreement. It could be created simply by putting in a request, someone looking at the request, and now there's a software-defined org. But then if nothing happens, it's effervescent. So there is no...
yeah, but I don't think that going into that point helps us any... because it sort of detracts from understanding, if anything, to point that out.
Yeah.
It'd be like trying to point out that most of the matter you see around you is actually empty space. I'm like, well,
yeah,
okay.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'll drop that.
And then...
I've probably gone up
right,
too far.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that,
Yeah. Okay.
Even an org itself is fucking what, really, when you really boil it down.
Yeah.
The software-defined one is at least a bit more, because at least the fucking rules are written down somewhere.
Right. Yeah, and you can see how it should be, somewhat deterministic based on those rules and the event changes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see. Yeah, I'm happy with that.
It seemed like that's a good way to pick a good catchphrase that doesn't lose too much fidelity, but can still pass through the tweet. The tweet hole, where it's like, you can say this in a tweet, people will kind of sort of know what you mean.
Yeah. It's a slight aside, but maybe as a kind of reinforcement. So it was date night last night. Remember, I asked, can you send, because I was just on my phone and I didn't have access to GitHub easily. It was like a conversation. So the background was took Jude out for a meal, and we were in a bar talking to a couple of ladies who were lovely and locals and part of the kind of Edinburgh gentry. So they live in the very, very posh bit, the bit where the chairman of Royal Bank of Scotland lives, that sort of thing. So then this guy turns up, who's the brother of one of them, and always comes the question, so what do you do? And I just got bored about, trying to explain it to everyone before that, but he was a financier. So he's a banker. So I described to him in words this diagram, and he got it in a flash. He was starting to, he's a smart guy, but he was starting to project forward the implications of this. It's like, so, what we're saying is this is, I didn't say this word, but it's like he was saying, so the cap table is just generated, through software and changes through time based on people's effort and the output as opposed to the hours turned up. So he's asking interesting questions just by essentially going through this diagram with them. So that was it was
that's cool.
Really quite powerful. And the conversation must have lasted about 10 minutes. It was in a loud bar. We're both stone cold sober, which would have helped, but nevertheless, the environment was quite loud and flashy. But he got it as a smart banker. I gave him the general gist of what's on this diagram, and then he could extrapolate forward And they got started quite excited about it, which is when they said, "Have you got a business card?" No, I don't have a business card. I said, "Well, have you
The
got
better question is, have we got a business?
It's like, you've got a website." Well, we've sort of got a website, yeah. And then it's like, what the fuck is it? Where's the URL? Oh, that's weird. And you got a website. It's like, yeah, I got a website. And it's like, shit, no, I can't actually remember where the URL was. But anyway, the upshot of that is this diagram is very easy to describe without looking at this diagram as a kind of 5-minute pitch. And he's even to the extent he was saying, "So what round of funding are you on?" And I went, "That's not the wrong question." He said, "Oh, of course that's not the wrong. That's the wrong question, because you're actually trying to avoid funding."
We're yeah, no, we're probably on about Series F right now, and
yeah,
we're about to launch into actual, genuine, like using our own model.
yeah, and doing stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we've been through multiple rounds. We're at about $25 million worth of wasted money.
Yeah.
Probably sounds cheap compared to what I can do.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's back when $25 million was a lot of money as well.
Back then, that was a decent amount of money.
So, yeah, I guess the point being, this is a good conceptual model. And if I were to, what I didn't have, interesting enough, it was that leading thing, because when he first said, "So, what do you do?" So, I'm into software, and we're trying to do X and Y. I didn't have a word I could say. So, software defined organization as a word to give.
Right, but we're trying to make software defined orgs for every single object on a per object basis. I think it's that scale that's important, and then that leads into the parallelism that you were talking about in your comments on Discord.
Yeah.
Because the part that's missing, I've been talking about these score bars for equity, home score, those types of things. There should also be one for elasticity. And for the life of me, I can't seem to quite sum up why it is that you need these very small units to enable very large elasticity. There's something about, like, you couldn't do this while you had big pieces of tin, or while you had whole operating systems that get provisioned and installed. There's a bunch of
it's because the triggering the energy triggering level in order to get up to the next chunk. So if your chunks are very big, you need a lot of energy to trigger up to 2 chunks, a lot of energy to go up to 3 chunks. If the chunks are tiny, you need a small amount of energy. And what that means is because it needs a less amount of energy, you need less change in the outside world in order to make it valid that you go to the next chunk. So the bigger your chunks are, the more the triggering energy requirement, and the less often that.
Right. So each evolutionary stage, when you're big, is highly, highly expensive.
Right.
May not happen.
Right.
But the smaller you are, the more sort of mundane that evolution can become, and the more accessible the resources that can trigger you to those next levels are, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
There's the difference between, a grain of sand and a breeze block. Both are essentially doing the same thing, like building up something, from a flat plane, but it's so much easier to put a grain of sand down. It's less.
But there's something about that. Each little grain of sand comes supported by a software-defined org. Like I'm starting to become infatuated with the idea of having no currency in the Dreamcatcher, because basically everything's an NFT, and we model all money or all value or all things as NFTs, with the Dreamcatcher itself being a collection of NFTs of varying values.
Right.
So if you want to buy some Dreamcatcher, the closest thing you can get to it is to buy some of the NFTs that are used to make up the Dreamcatcher, if someone will sell it to you, and the only sort of real, there's no like self-minting to ourselves or a foundation. It's just the only way anyone makes money is by being of actual use and being paid a royalty.
Good God. You're going to have to actually...
It sounds insane, right? Like, it sounds insane even for corporations to be that brutal about their utility, let alone a blockchain. And it's starting to really hit me that, like, Ethereum was cursed from the day they did that ICO. They made it so there was going to be a conflict in the way that their incentives were.
Right.
Because you've got holders that are always going to try to screw the miners, the rule setters. It's all, whereas if our system is actually genuinely inviting forks, inviting setting up your own object because it's cheap.
Yeah.
We don't charge any money directly. You don't need to buy Ethereum to run our system. You just have to pay someone in some value that they value that you transmitted using our protocol. That's all we're really asking. Please pay your royalties.
Yeah. And also, that's I was saying when we were talking about this yesterday, that's the job of the portal, or probably many portals. Why not do it in
many portals?
Yeah, as many as you
many
want.
Portals.
You could do it.
I don't see that there would be a point to having intrinsic value. There's almost a negative point, or sort of like having an internal currency detracts from the actual value that we can capture, which is total value locked.
I could not.
That should be enormous.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And this idea, after you stated it yesterday, it's been going around my head like a hairy worm. But the way I've been thinking about it is actually the value we're giving or offering is a complete witness. It's here's reality, and it's all there, and all the attribution, and you made this agreement at this point, this contracted agreement, and you did this, and it went through Q. All of it is a complete. Well, basically, it's a global, kind of godlike oracle that says this is true. Now, what you want to do about that, in terms of exchanging cash or whatever, that's fine. That's where there's the portal for money in and money out also has to do with what we're doing with the DPL, which is like the earthing into real law, saying that this witness, this global oracle, has the truth, and you've got a license here saying that actually, this is how I'm going to offer the use of that out in the real world, and you've got a contract in here saying, okay, I'm going to have some cash for that, but that's kind of by the by, that's off. That's not fundamental to this, because you could run the entire thing based on altruism and people turning up and volunteering and doing it, and it would all still work. Not a single penny would actually have to pass. Now, you're not going to get much useful done in terms of building things, because that costs people time. But intrinsically, this is just a global oracle of the truth. This is what happened. This is what you agreed. This is what you did. Yeah. This is what output.
Well, I hope it becomes something more. Like, in terms of total value locked, if we can turn this into an object model that models the entire world, that's all value everywhere, all things, all the time, being modeled in this protocol. That's like the next internet.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's sort of the thing we want to have the capacity to do. Someone's going to do that. The format's probably going to be very bare, very minimal. That's sort of what we've aimed at the whole time. Honestly, if we can imbue the system with self-improvement, we'll get there.
Yeah. Without a doubt, because Darwinism works, especially if you've designed a thing to be Darwinian.
If it was designed to be Darwinian, then you're gonna get there. It's gonna be rough, and you're not gonna look like you thought you would when you started. But you're gonna get there.
But no, I actually absolutely agree. I said, we think about what you said, and it feels like, I don't know, going off piste a bit because everyone's got token and everyone, you know.
I think it's great. I think it's a great distinguisher. It's like we don't have a token, we don't have a currency. We map and manage any currency from anywhere, provided you choose to accept it.
Right. Yeah.
We can track the provenance and the data and the invoices and the everything. We can basically store an unlimited amount of data for any transaction, for any piece of value or any object, even objects that are virtual, such as ideas.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
You know, that was the point of the system.
And, you know, even conceptually, deleting the idea of currency or a token from this doesn't change any of the functionality that I can see.
No, it doesn't at all. It's like an eyebrow raising thing. Like if we go into a VC looking for some funding and they're like, "What's your token?" We're like,
"Don't need one."
No,
you're missing the point.
Yeah. Okay, well, I better get going.
All right. Now tomorrow and Saturday, I'm off doing family stuff, so I'm not available until